Picture a house buried up to its windows in snow. Now fill it with smoke, because the chimney draws badly when the wind comes from the northwest, and the wind has come from the northwest for 11 days straight. Add 8 people sleeping in 2 rooms, a barrel of salted pork that has to last until April, water that freezes solid in the bucket 3 feet from the fire, and a single flame on the hearth that is, without exaggeration, the only thing standing between everyone in that house and death. That's New England in the winter of 1740. The coldest winter anyone living could remember, and some of the people living had remembered a lot of winters. A place where the harbour at Boston froze so hard that men drove loaded sleighs across salt water, where ink froze in the inkwell while the minister was writing his sermon, and where you could lose your fingers doing a chore you'd done 1,000 times, simply because this time you did it a little too slowly. We're going back there tonight, not as visitors admiring the pretty snow on the pine trees. We're living it. One winter, one person, everything he would have felt, hauled, feared, and survived. So, I make these history stories, and honestly, I still don't know if anyone actually sleeps to them, or if you're all just lying there in your heated bedrooms under your clean blankets, quietly grateful that you will never have to break ice off the inside of your own window with your thumbnail. Either way, subscribe if you want. Get comfortable. Pull the blanket a little higher. You're going to want it. Here we go. The fire is dying, and it is your fault. That's the first thought in your head before you're even fully awake. Not a dream. A fact, arriving cold and complete. The fire is dying, and you are supposed to bank it. And if it goes out in this cold in this house, someone will have to walk 1/2 mile through the dark to the Hoyt's place to beg a shovelful of live coals, and that someone will be you, because you're 16 years old and you are the hired boy, and the cold jobs are your jobs. That's the arrangement. Nobody wrote it down. Nobody had to. You lie still for 1 more second listening. The house is making its night sounds, not settling sounds, cracking sounds. The frame of the house, oak beams a foot thick, pegged together by men who are dead now, is contracting in the cold, and every few minutes a joint somewhere gives a report like a musket shot. The first night you slept here, back in September, you thought someone was breaking in. Now you know better. The house is just enduring, the same as everyone inside it. Under the cracking, there's a softer sound. The fire, or what's left of it. A faint ticking, a settling of coals. Not the steady breathing of a healthy banked fire. Something thinner, something going out. You push back the blanket and the cold comes down on you like a hand. You need to understand what cold means in this house, because it is not what cold means to you. This is not a chilly room. This is a room where the water in the wash basin froze an inch thick overnight, where the bread left on the table froze hard enough to blunt a knife, where the nails in the wall by your bed have grown little white beards of frost from nothing but the moisture of your own breathing. 8 hours of it, freezing out of the air onto iron. Ministers this winter are writing in their diaries, real diaries, you can read them today, that the sacramental bread froze on the plate and rattled, that the communion wine froze in the cup, in church, during the service, with 100 bodies in the room. That's the cold you sit up into. It goes through your shirt like it isn't there. Your name is Ezra Wheelock. You're 16 years old and you were bound out to Josiah Strong's farm 2 years ago, after your father died, and your mother, with 5 children younger than you, could not feed 6. It was not a cruelty. It was arithmetic. You understood it then and you understand it now, and it still sits in your chest like a stone on some nights. And this is one of those nights, at whatever black hour this is, in a freezing loft in the township of Northfield, in the province of Massachusetts Bay, in the valley of the Connecticut River, in December of the year 1740. The loft is where you sleep, up under the roof, sharing a rope bed and a wool blanket and a straw tick with Amos, the strong second son who is 14 and who sleeps like the dead and steals the blanket like the living. You share a bed. Everyone shares a bed. Warmth is not a preference in this world. It is a supply, like firewood, like meal, and you do not waste supplies. A boy sleeping alone in an unheated loft in this winter is not enjoying his privacy. He is losing heat he cannot spare. You slide out from under the blanket without waking Amos, because if you wake Amos he will complain, and if he complains loudly enough his mother will wake, and then everyone will know the fire was let down on your watch, and there are worse things than cold, and one of them is the particular silence Goodwife Strong can produce at breakfast, when the hired boy has failed at something. Your bare feet find the floorboards, and the floorboards are so cold they feel wet. Down the ladder. You know the rungs in the dark, know the third one creaks, know to put your weight to the left side of it. Micro-knowledge. The kind of knowledge that fills a servant's head instead of Latin. Your hands know the ladder's rails, the grain of the wood, the smooth patch worn by 40 years of other hands, hands of people you never met going down in the dark to tend other fires. The keeping room, when you reach it, is the warmest room in the house, and it is cold enough that your breath shows faintly in the light of the coals, and there they are, the coals, a dull orange scatter under a crust of grey ash, low, sinking, maybe an hour from black. Here is what you know, standing there with your feet going numb on the hearthstones. Fire in 1740 is not something you switch on. There are no matches. Matches are 100 years away. If this fire dies, you make a new one with flint and steel and charred linen in a tinderbox, striking sparks with stiff fingers in the dark, and on a dry summer evening that takes a practised man 2 minutes, and on a night like this, with your hands shaking and the tinder damp with frost, it can take 20, and sometimes it simply does not work at all. Which is why the fire is never allowed to die. Which is why the last chore of every single night, more important than prayers, no, alongside prayers, Goodwife Strong would say, and look at you until you agreed, is banking the fire, raking the coals into a heap, burying them in their own ashes so they smoulder slow and safe till morning, like putting the fire to bed. You did bank it, you remember doing it, but you did it fast, because you were tired. Because it was the end of a day that started before dawn in the barn, and a fast banking is a shallow banking, and a shallow banking on the coldest night of the year is how a house goes dark. The fire is the heart of this house, not a metaphor. The house was built around the chimney the way a body is built around a heart, a great central stack of stone and brick, 10 feet across at its base, with every room huddled up against it. When people in this valley say a family has kept their fire through a hard winter, they mean the family survived. When a household breaks up, when a widow gives up the farm, the phrase people use is that her fire has gone out. Yours has not gone out. Not yet. You kneel on the hearth. The stones bite your knees through your shirt. You take the fire shovel. Its handle is iron, and it is so cold that it hurts. Not like touching something cold, like touching something hot, that same bright bite. and you scrape back the dead ash gently, gently, the sound of it very loud in the sleeping house, a soft gritty scraping, and there, underneath, a bed of live coals the size of 2 spread hands, pulsing a low red when the air hits them. Alive, barely. You breathe out, and you didn't know you'd been holding it. Now, tinder. Birch bark from the box by the settle, curls of it, dry as paper, peeled last fall and hoarded like money. You lay 2 curls on the coals with fingers that have stopped feeling their tips, and you lean down until your face is close enough to feel the small heat on your cheeks, and you blow, long and low, not a puff, a breath, steady. The way Josiah Strong taught you your first week here, the only lesson he ever gave you gently. You don't force a fire, boy. You ask it. The coals brighten, dim, brighten. The birch bark smokes, curls tighter, and then, with a sound like a whisper tearing, takes flame. Light jumps up the chimney throat, and the room comes back into being around you. The long table, the settle with its high back built to trap heat, the strings of dried apples hanging from the summer beam like leathery little moons, the musket over the door itself with its bar dropped in its brackets, barred not against men mostly, this far up the valley in this generation, but the bar goes down every night anyway, because Northfield is a town that's been burned before, twice, inside living memory, and towns that have been burned bar their doors for 100 years after. You feed the flame, splinters first, then the pine kindling, laid crosswise, then 2 split sticks of oak from the pile in the corner, and the fire climbs them and steadies, and begins, at last, to give back heat, and you kneel there in front of it and hold out your hands, and the pain of them thawing is its own special thing. A deep ache, then a prickling, then a burning, as if the cold were a substance being forced back out through the skin. Nobody saw. Nobody will know. The fire will be strong by morning, and the house will wake warm. Warm meaning 40 degrees. Warm meaning the water in the kettle is liquid. And Goodwife Strong will find nothing to be silent about. You should go back up the ladder. You don't, for 1 minute. You kneel on the hearth of another family's house, in front of a fire you nearly lost, 16 years old, 2 years an orphan on your father's side, 40 miles from your mother, and you let the heat push against your face. And outside the barred door the cold presses down on 40 houses and 400 people, and 1 frozen river, all of it silent, all of it white, all of it waiting for morning. This is the world you live in now, and this is the first rule of it. Keep your fire. Morning arrives as a greying of the cracks around the shutters, and by then you are already up, because on a farm in December you rise in the dark or you fall behind the daylight, and the daylight in late December in Massachusetts is 9 hours long, and everything that keeps 11 animals and 8 people alive has to happen inside those 9 hours. Dressing is fast because you barely undressed. You sleep in your shirt. Over it now go the waistcoat, the wool breeches, the long wool stockings pulled up over the knee and gartered, and then the leather shoes. And here is a detail nobody tells you about the past. Your shoes are straights. There is no left shoe and no right shoe. They are identical, and you swap them foot to foot every few days so they wear even, and they never quite fit either foot. And in the cold the leather freezes into a shape overnight, and you have to fight your foot into it, prying, stamping the frozen leather, creaking like a saddle. There are no rubber boots. Rubber boots do not exist. If your feet are going to stay dry today, it will be because of grease. Tallow and beeswax worked into the leather by your own thumbs on Saturday. And luck. and it has to be said that in snow this deep, neither works for long. Last, the great coat, which is your dead father's coat, cut down by your mother before you left home, and a knitted cap pulled to your eyebrows, and mittens. Not gloves, mittens, because fingers together stay warm and fingers apart die alone, which is the kind of thing that sounds like a sermon and is actually just thermodynamics, and a wool muffler wound twice around your neck and jaw. Then you unbar the door and step out, and the cold hits you in the face like water. The first breath is the one you remember all day. The air is so cold it has a texture going in, a dryness, a scrape at the back of the throat, and your nostrils pinch and prickle as the hairs inside them freeze. Instantly on the first breath, a strange crisping feeling you will never in your life get used to, and your eyes water and the tears feel scalding on your cheeks, and then they too begin to stiffen at your lashes. It is perhaps 20 degrees below zero. Nobody in Northfield knows that number. Thermometers exist. Gentlemen in Boston have them, and one of them this very winter will record the mercury sunk deeper than anyone has seen. But here the measurements are different. Here cold is measured in what it does. Today's cold is, the snow does not crunch, it squeaks. A high, dry squeak under every step like a knife on a plate. Today's cold is, the sap in the maple trees at the wood's edge has frozen and split the trunks, and every so often from across the fields comes a crack like gunfire. A whole tree burst in its own heart. Today's cold is, spit freezes before it lands. Amos tried it. Amos is 14. Of course he tried it. The world in the grey light is beautiful in a way that has nothing to do with kindness. Snow to your thighs in the open, drifted to the eaves against the north wall of the barn. Smoke rising from the chimneys of the village in dead straight lines. A dozen white columns standing on the pink sky, because the air is too cold even to move. The river, you can see a bend of it from the dooryard, the great Connecticut, the road of the whole valley, is white and still, locked under ice that has been thickening for a month. And over everything a silence so complete that you can hear a dog bark in a farmyard a mile down the valley. Hear it clearly, every note, as if the cold were glass and sound, a light shining through it. You're not out here to look at it. You're out here because the animals are 20 steps away, and those 20 steps are the first work of the day. The path to the barn was shovelled yesterday and drifted in again overnight, and you break through it stiff-legged, high-stepping, your breath streaming back over your shoulder, and you haul open the barn door against its own frozen hinges. It screams, it always screams, the iron dry and shrunken, and step into the animal dark. And here is the thing about the barn in winter, the thing that would surprise you. It is warmer than the house, not warm, but warmer. 11 bodies live in here, 2 oxen, a horse, 3 cows, 5 sheep, plus the hens roosting up in the dark of the rafters. And each of those bodies is a stove that runs on hay, and the barn holds their heat in its thick timbers and its haymow overhead like a blanket. And stepping in from the yard, the air folds around you almost gently, thick, alive, 40 degrees of animal warmth, and the smell. The smell is enormous. Ding and piss and hay and hide, and the sweetish breath of cattle. All of it concentrated by the closed doors of winter, and it should be disgusting, and it is not. Or it is, and it doesn't matter, because that smell is the smell of wealth. Every animal in this barn is money the family cannot replace. The oxen are the plough and the cart and the wood sled. Lose an ox and you have lost your ability to farm. The cows are milk and butter and cheese and next year's calves. The sheep are the stockings on your legs and the blanket you slept under. When the strong sit down at night and Josiah says grace, the animals are inside that grace, and not as a figure of speech. The oxen turn their heads to you slow as doors. Their names are Buck and Bright, because in New England the off-ox is always Buck and the near-ox is always Bright, in 1,000 barns, the way all firstborn sons are named for their fathers. Their breath comes out in twin plumes. Frost furs their eyelashes. The near cow lows at you, a complaint, and she is right to complain, because the water is your first job and the water is a fight. Every trough in the barn froze overnight, not skimmed with ice, frozen, inches deep. And you take up the wooden maul that lives by the door for exactly this, and you break the ice out of the troughs, swinging down into each one, the shock of it jarring up your arm bones into your shoulders, the ice leaping in white slabs and shards, and then you carry the slabs out and pitch them onto the ice heap by the door, a growing grey monument to every morning of this winter. Then buckets. The well in the yard has a foot of ice round its mouth like a stone lip, and you draw and carry 2 buckets a trip. The bale handles finding the same grooves in your mittened fingers, the water slopping and freezing where it slops, your shoulders a long dull ache before the sun has even cleared the hill, and the animals drink and drink and drink. A working ox in cold like this drinks 10 gallons. You do that arithmetic with your spine. Then down from the mow, forked through the dust-hung dark, the fork handle polished by your own 2 hands to a shine like bone. Then the milking, and the milking in winter is its own small mercy, because you do it with your forehead pressed into the cow's warm flank, and she is the warmest thing you will touch all day, a great breathing wall of heat, and your hands work. Pull and squeeze, the milk hissing into the wooden pail in a fast thin rhythm, and your hands, for these few minutes, are almost soft again. The milk steams. By the time you carry it to the house, a skin of ice will have formed on it. Milk freezes in the pail between the barn and the kitchen. 30 steps. That's the winter you're in. You muck out. You spread fresh straw. You check the sheep the way you were taught, hands down into the greasy heat of the fleece. Sheep's wool is full of lanolin, and your cracked knuckles love it. It is the only ointment you will get. And you count them, 5, because sheep are the ones the wolves want. And wolves are not a story here. You have heard them this winter more than any winter anyone remembers, because the deep snow and the iron cold are starving them out of the hills and pushing them down toward the smell of the farms. At night, from the loft, you have heard the long cry come down the valley and be answered, and the sound does something to the back of your neck that 10,000 years of firelight has not managed to breed out of you. The town pays a bounty for wolves. It is written in the town book, so much a head, the selectman's cure for everything. And the men talk of a wolf hunt when the crust hardens, a great circle of farmers closing on the swamp. Last week something took a sheep from the Fields place at the north end, took it out of the pen, and what was left in the morning was mostly red snow, and a story that every boy in town has now told every other boy at least twice, each time with improvements. So you count the sheep. 5. You look at the pen rails. Sound. You bar the barn behind you when you go. The sun is fully up now, small and white, and without warmth, a coin of light. Your stomach has been growling for an hour. In the house there will be breakfast. Hasty pudding, which is cornmeal mush, boiled in the great pot on its trammel hook over the fire, eaten hot with a little milk, and if Goodwife Strong is feeling open-handed, a thread of molasses. You will eat it fast and you will be grateful, and the gratitude is real, because you have seen this valley's memory of hunger in the eyes of the old people, and because corn, Indian corn, the yellow gold of New England, is the whole floor under everyone's feet. Wheat blasts and mildews in this country. Corn endures. Corn is the pudding in the morning and the johnny cake at noon and the samp at night. Corn fattens the pig you'll eat next winter. Corn is what your labour is half paid in. You were bound to Josiah Strong for your keep, your clothes, and £3 a year, and when you are paid, some of what you are paid will be corn, because coin is scarce in the valley, and corn is money that grows. But before breakfast, one more thing, because there is always one more thing, and this one is the one that rules the whole day, the whole winter, the whole world. Wood. Stop and feel the size of this. Every warm minute of every day of every winter of every life in this valley comes from a woodpile, and the woodpile only comes from a man with an axe, and the fire in the Strong's keeping room, kept burning day and night from October to May, eats, listen to this number, somewhere between 30 and 40 cords of wood in a year. A cord is a stack 4 feet high, 4 feet deep, 8 feet long. 40 of them laid end to end would run longer than the meetinghouse green, every stick of it cut by hand with an axe from standing trees, hauled by oxen, sawed to length, split, stacked, carried in armload by a boy. It is always you, until by winter's end you will have carried, one armload at a time, roughly 10 tons of wood across that dooryard. And here is the joke the whole valley knows and nobody laughs at. The great open fireplace, that roaring glory of a fire, sends most of its heat straight up the chimney. Stand before it and your face cooks while your back freezes. The far corners of the room stay cold enough to keep meat. A visiting gentleman will write of sitting by a New England fire with his ink freezing on the pen. You warm yourself twice with wood, the saying goes, once cutting it, once burning it, and the second warming is the smaller one. The woodpile by the door is shrinking. You can see the ground line of it creeping backward like a tide going out, and it is only December, and Josiah Strong stands beside you looking at it with his jaw working slowly, saying nothing, and you both know what the shrinking pile means. It means today, after breakfast, you go up to the woodlot. It means axes. Breakfast is eaten standing mostly, and quickly, always. The pudding is thick and hot and tastes of almost nothing, which after 2 hours in the cold tastes like everything. You eat with a wooden spoon from a wooden trencher, and you and Amos share the trencher, one eating from each end, which is normal, which nobody remarks on, which would only seem strange to someone from a century where every person expects a plate of their own. Plates of their own are for the minister and the magistrate. Down at your end of the world you share. Goodwife Strong moves around the fire the whole meal, never sitting, because her work has been going since before yours. She has swung the crane, hung the pot, raked coals under the bake kettle, set the beans to soak. Understand what the fireplace asks of her. Cooking here is not turning a dial. It is reading coals, knowing by colour and smell whether the bake oven in the chimney side is hot enough, which she tests by thrusting her bare arm into it and counting how long she can hold it there, and she is never wrong. Her forearms carry a lifetime's record of small scars, pale commas of old burns, because she works all day, every day, inches from open flame, in long skirts, and this winter, like every winter, some woman in the province will burn to death when her hem sweeps the coals, and everyone knows it, and the work has to be done anyway, and so it is done. fire is the family's life and the family's danger, both at once, all the time. Nobody here finds that strange. It is simply the shape of the bargain. Josiah Strong finishes, sets down his spoon and says, "Wood today. Ezra, yoke the team. 6 words. That's the plan, the orders, and the schedule. You have learned that Josiah spends words the way he spends shillings, which is to say almost never, and that this is not unkindness. He is 45 years old, which in this valley is not young. He buried 2 children before Amos was born, which you know not because he told you, but because their small stones stand in the burying ground, lambs and death's heads carved at the top. He was a boy in this town when it was the last town, the northern edge of everything English, and whatever he saw then he keeps behind his teeth. His hands are the biggest you have ever seen on a man, and you have watched those hands splice a rope, set a hinge, and pull a lamb into the world. And you have concluded that Josiah Strong says little, because his hands are doing the talking all day, every day, and they are rarely wrong. Yoking oxen is a skill you did not have 2 years ago and have now, and there is a small, dumb pride in it that you keep to yourself. The yoke is a beam of shaped maple, heavy as a fence rail, and you carry it on your shoulder into the barn, and Buck and Bright stand for you. They know the work, they have done it 1,000 times. They walk to their places like old men going to their pew, and you drop the yoke across their necks, slide the curved bows up under their throats, pin them, hook the chain. Their patience is total. An ox is not clever the way a horse is clever, but an ox in snow is worth 2 horses. He does not panic. He does not founder. He puts his head down and leans into the weight of the world 1 step at a time. And there is a lesson in that which every farmer in New England has already noticed, because farmers here name their sermons after their livestock more often than the minister would like. Then up the hill, you and Josiah and the team and the sled, into the woodlot, into the trees, into the work. And I want you to live in this work for a while, because this work is the winter. This is what the season actually was for the people inside it. Not sleigh bells, not skating parties. Those existed and we will get there. But underneath all of it, always this. 2 humans in a frozen forest, turning trees into the possibility of staying alive. Josiah fells. You limb and pile brush. The axe he swings is not the axe of the storybooks. It is plain, forged by the smith down the valley, its edge maintained on the grindstone by the barn every Saturday, and in his hands it is a precise instrument. He notches the trunk low on the side he wants it to fall, then moves around and cuts above the notch from behind, and the chips fly out yellow-white against the snow, big clean chips the size of your palm, and the sound of it goes knocking off through the woods, chock, 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 and comes knocking back off the hill across the hollow half a beat later, so it always sounds like 2 men working, one of them a ghost. The tree, this one an oak, dead 2 years, standing dry, the best firewood there is, begins to speak before it goes. A creak, a groan down in the wood's own grain. Josiah steps back and watches the top, and then the whole world of it tips, slow, then not slow, and comes down through its neighbours with a tearing rush, and hits the snow with a boom you feel in the ground through your frozen feet, and the snow it throws up hangs in the sunlight like smoke, glittering, settling, and the woods go silent again, and somewhere far off a crow files a complaint. Then it's yours, limbing. You work down the trunk with the lighter axe, taking each branch flush, and the work has a rhythm your body has learned to disappear into. Plant the feet, eye the branch, Swing from the hips, let the axe's own weight do the last of it, and within half an hour, in air cold enough to crack trees, you are sweating. And sweating in this world is dangerous, and you know it, because Josiah told you once, in one of his 10-word lectures, wet man freezes, work steady, not hard. Sweat soaks the shirt, and wet wool against the skin when you stop moving will pull the heat out of your body faster than the fire can put it back, and men have died of exactly that, worked themselves wet on a warm noon, and been found cold on a cold evening. So you learn the discipline no one in a heated century will ever need. To work at the edge of warmth, steady as an ox, opening your coat when you heat up, closing it when you slow, managing your own animal heat all day long like a fire you're also keeping. Your hands inside the mittens are another negotiation. The axe handle is smooth hickory, and even through wool it steals heat at every grip. Your knuckles have split along the old cracks. Everyone's have. It is simply what winter does to hands at work wet and cold. The skin dries and opens in little red mouths that catch on everything. And tonight, Goodwife Strong will make you hold them out, and she will rub tallow into the cracks, muttering, not gently, and the not gentleness is the affection. You have learned to read it. It took you a year. By the time the sun stands at noon, low even at noon, sliding along the hilltops like it's afraid of heights, the sled is loaded past the stakes, oak in 8-foot lengths, 1.5 tons of tomorrow's warmth, and Buck and Bright lean into the yoke, and the runners squeal on the dry snow, that high, protesting squeak, all the way down the hill, and you walk behind with your shadow long and blue in front of you, and your body hurts in the plain, honest way that has stopped being remarkable to you. Shoulders, forearms, the small of the back, the little muscles between the ribs. You're 16. You are, though you do not know the phrase, in the best condition of your life. You'll simply call it tired. And here, walking down behind the sled, comes the moment that happens in every one of these days, if you're the kind of person it happens to. You stop, for no reason, at the turn of the track where the woods open, and you look. The valley is below you. The river lies along the bottom of it, a mile of white silence, and the town stands beside the river. One street, wide as a field, running north and south, with the houses set along it facing each other across the common land, grey clappered and steep roofs, every chimney smoking, 40 little fires holding 40 little territories against 400 miles of frozen wilderness. Because that is what this is, and you should know it. North of this town there is almost nothing English. A few new settlements up the river, thin as frost. Then forest, all the way to Canada. Northfield has been the edge of the world twice, and twice the world came out of those northern woods with fire, and twice this town died and was born again. Abandoned in 1675, abandoned in 1690, resettled for good only a generation ago. And the oldest people in those houses below you carry all of that inside them, and mostly do not speak of it. And when the minister prays on Sabbath for peace on the frontiers, the room goes very quiet, and it is not a formality. You stand there maybe 30 seconds, a hired boy with tallow on his knuckles, looking at the whole visible world. Then the sled squeals on ahead of you, and Josiah's voice comes back level through the cold air. One word, your name, and you go. Because the light is already leaning west, and the wood is not yet sawed, not yet split, not yet stacked, and the animals will need water again at dusk, and the fire needs feeding now, and at supper, and at bedtime, and at midnight if the cold deepens, and at dawn. The fire always needs feeding, That's not a burden exactly, it's more like a pulse. You will spend this whole winter, this whole youth, inside the rhythm of it. Wake, feed the fire, feed the animals, feed the people, feed the fire, work, feed the fire, sleep, wake in the dark, feed the fire. 40 cords a year, 10 tons in your arms, 1 armload at a time. Keep your fire. First rule. You're learning it in your bones now, where rules actually live. The days repeat, and repeating they braid together, and a week goes by that you can only tell apart afterward by its accidents. The day the hens' water froze so fast you had to bring them warm mash twice. The day Amos put his tongue on the latch of the barn door on a dare from nobody, from himself, and left a little of it there and howled and swore you to secrecy, and you kept the secret for the length of 1 supper. The day a peddler came up the valley on snowshoes with needles and printed ballads and news, and the news was that the harbour at Boston was frozen over, all of it, salt water, and that people were crossing on the ice to Castle William, walking on the sea, and half the town believed him, and half didn't. And he was right. It was true. It is in the record to this day. And then comes Saturday night. And Saturday night in a Massachusetts town is not the beginning of rest. It is the beginning of the Sabbath, which begins at sundown, and the Sabbath is the one appointment in this world that outranks the weather. Understand what Sunday means here, because it is not what Sunday means to you. Attendance at meeting is not a choice. It is the law of the province, with fines on the books for absence without cause. But the law is the smallest part of it. The meeting house is the reason the town exists. Legally, literally. A town in Massachusetts is founded by gathering a church and settling a minister. That is what makes it a town and not a scatter of farms. And Sunday is the one day the whole organism assembles in one room and becomes visible to itself. Every family, every servant, every child old enough to sit, through anything, through this. So on Sunday morning the fires are banked, the animals are done early, and the town moves down its one long street through the snow toward the meeting house, on foot, on horseback with wives riding pillion behind husbands, and in sleighs with hot stones wrapped in cloth at everyone's feet. Breath rising off the whole procession like off a herd. The meeting house stands on its rise mid-town, and it is the largest thing you have ever been inside. A great square timber box, 2 tiers of windows, grey as the sky, crowned with nothing. No steeple here yet, no bell. The town is summoned by a drum or by a horn, the same as it was summoned to raise its houses and once to defend them. Inside, a high pulpit halfway up the wall with a sounding board hung above it like a wooden halo, box pews below, galleries above for the young people and servants, which is you, up the stairs, on a plank bench under the roof. And no fire. None. There is no stove, no fireplace, not a candle's worth of heat in the whole building, and there will not be for decades yet. And this is partly poverty and partly principle. There are old people in this town who will tell you entirely seriously that a warm meeting house makes drowsy hearts, that their grandfathers worshipped God at 40 below, and were the better for it. So the town sits down in a box of frozen air and worships. 2 services, forenoon and afternoon, a sermon in each, an hour and more apiece, with a nooning between. The cold inside is somehow worse than the cold outside, stiller, older. The congregation's breath goes up in 100 columns. The women have their foot stoves, little pierced tin boxes in wooden frames, carried from home with live coals inside, set under the skirts in the pew, and small children are placed around them like puppies. and the men have their greatcoats and their principals, and up in the gallery you have neither coals nor principals, only Amos's shoulder against yours on one side and the Hoyt's boy on the other. 3 boys pressed into one warmth, watching your own breathing drift out over the rail. The minister is old Mr. Doolittle, and his voice is the one voice everyone in this town has heard every week of their lives, and this morning, in the middle of the long prayer, comes a moment you will tell people about when you're old. He pauses and looks at the communion table, and the water in the christening basin has frozen in the meeting house during the service. He sends a deacon's son running to a neighbouring house to thaw it against a newborn's forehead, and continues, and no one is astonished, and the sermon that follows takes its text from Job. He casteth forth his ice like morsels. Who can stand before his cold? And 400 people who cannot stand before it, who are at that moment losing the feeling in their feet, say, Amen. Here is the strange part, the part you would not guess. You don't hate it. The nooning between services happens in the Sabbath houses, little huts near the meeting house, each shared by a few families with fireplaces, and in them the town thaws and eats cold pie and warm cider and talks. And the talk is everything. It is the week's newspaper, the market report, the court record. Who is sick? Whose ox went through the ice at the ferry place and was hauled out by 6 men with ropes, alive, God be thanked. What the peddler said about Boston, and what a man down from Fort Dummer said about the North, and whether the fields will get their corn ground before the mill's pond and the mill's wheel lock up entirely, because the miller has been fighting ice on his wheel for a fortnight, chopping it off the buckets every morning and losing. You stand at the edge of the men's talk with the other boys, holding your noggin of cider in both hands for the heat of it, listening, and this is where you learn the world. And a small thing happens. Josiah, talking to Deacon Field about the woodlot, says, 6 words again his currency. The boy fells clean now, steady. He does not look at you when he says it. You look very hard into your cider. But you carry those 6 words up into the freezing gallery for the afternoon sermon, and they are warm enough all afternoon to be a kind of foot stove of your own. You are 2 years from home, £3 a year, the last to eat and the first to rise, and a man of few words has spent 6 of them on you in public. Appearances matter in this town. Standing matters, reputation matters, more than almost anything, because in a town of 400 souls there is nowhere to hide from what people think of you, and no one arrives new and no one leaves, and the ledger of your character is kept in every kitchen for your whole life. That can be a cage. You have felt it as a cage. But on this Sunday it is the other thing. The thing it is also, always at the same time, a net. Every person in this frozen box has a place in it, even you, especially you, and if your fire went out tonight, 10 doors would open. That is not sentiment. That is the town's whole engineering. Out there, alone the cold wins in a night. In here, gathered, fires shared, wood hauled to widows by vote of the town meeting, watches sat by sick beds in rotation. In here, the cold can be fought to a draw, every year, forever. One family alone freezes. A town endures. Second rule, write it under the first. January comes in and shuts the door behind it. If December was cold, January is something else, something that needs a different word, and the old people supply one. They begin calling it the hard winter, saying it the way you'd say a name, and the name will stick, and people will date things by it for 50 years. Born the spring after the hard winter, married 2 years before the hard winter. Snow falls on snow with no thaw between. The drifts against the north walls reach the eaves and stay. The paths between house and barn have become trenches with walls above your head, and stepping out the door in the morning is stepping into a white corridor roofed with sky, and the river closes, completely, absolutely, from bank to bank and from Deerfield up past the falls, ice going down 2 feet, 3 in the still water, and the day it is proved, the day Ensign Wright drives a loaded ox sled straight across at the ferry place and comes back laughing, the geography of the whole valley changes, because here is what nobody tells you about winter in this world. Once it settles, once the freeze is total, winter is the travelling season. Think about what the roads are the rest of the year. In spring they are mud to the axles. In summer, stumps and rocks and fords. A cart groans 5 miles in a day and breaks something doing it. But now God has paved the world. The snow, packed by sled runners and rolled smooth by use, turns every road into a white highway, and the frozen river is the best highway of all. Flat, straight, no hills, no stumps, running the length of the valley like a street laid down by angels. Now is when the year's heavy moving happens. Timber goes to the sawmill. Stones are sledded off the fields. Hay comes down from the far meadows. Whole loads of produce start down the valley toward the towns below, sled after sled. The drivers walk in beside in bearskin coats, and up from below come the things the valley cannot make: salt, iron, powder, rum, news. And so, on a still blue morning in mid-January, Josiah sends you down the river with the horse and the light sled, alone, to the mill at the falls, 4 miles, with 8 bushels of corn to be ground. Alone. 4 miles. Your own errand, your own judgment, another man's horse and another man's corn in your care. You understand what it is. It is a promotion, issued in Josiah's usual coin of silence, and you take the reins with your chest tight with the size of it, and Goodwife Strong hands you up a hot-boiled egg for each coat pocket, which is what mittens dream of becoming, and says only, "Home before dark, and mind the mouth of the brook. The ice is false there where the current comes in. Mind the mouth of the brook. Hold that sentence. We will need it later. The river, from down on its own surface, is a world you've never been in. The banks stand above you on both sides, hung with alders bearded in frost, and the ice stretches ahead blue-grey and dusted with dry snow that smokes along in front of the wind in low white snakes and the horse's shoes. The smith sharp shod him for winter. Toe and heel corks like little chisels. Bite and ring, and the sled runs behind with a hiss, and the ice talks. No one warned you about this. The whole river, all that locked water, is alive underneath, still flowing under its lid, and the lid itself is growing, and as it grows it splits and shifts and settles, and the sounds it makes come up through your feet and the horse's legs and the sled's frame. Long zipping cracks that go tearing away from you for 100 yards like something running. Deep booms from far off, felt more than heard, as if the river had a heart down there, beating slow. And now and then, right under you, a dry crunching mutter that stops your breath every single time, though the ice is 2 feet thick and would carry an army, and did. Armies have marched on this river's ice before you were born, and will again. You meet traffic. A timber sled behind 4 oxen, southbound, the logs chained high, the driver lifting his whip to you in salute. 2 boys from Sunderland skating upriver with a dog going like swallows showing off, and something in you aches to be them, and something older in you keeps the horse to his steady jog. An old man alone on the ice near the west bank, standing over a hole with a line in his hand, still as a heron, jigging for the fish that winter under the lid all season, and you know, everyone knows, that some of the poorest families along this river will be kept alive this winter by exactly that: a man, a hole, a line, patience. The mill, when you round the last bend, announces itself first as sound. The falls not frozen. Falling water fights freezing longest, but shrunken, muffled, running under and behind curtains of ice hung down the whole face of the drop. Pillars and organ pipes of ice, green-white, thick as trees, with the dark water muscling down behind them, and the mill crouched beside it all in a permanent cloud of frost smoke, every timber of it furred white an inch deep, like a building dipped in feathers. Inside, the mill is thunder and dust and one man shouting to be heard, and that man is Eliakim Root the miller, flowered white to the eyebrows like a ghost of himself, and the great stones are turning. He has won his fight with the ice this morning. The wheel is alive, and the whole building shudders with the gearing, oak teeth on oak teeth, a groaning underfoot like the ship you've never seen, and the warm smell of ground corn fills your head, thick, sweet, the smell of every meal you have ever eaten, being born. You wait your turn among the sacks with two other errand boys and a farmer from Bennett's meadow, and the miller takes his toll in kind, a 16th part scooped from your grist with a wooden measure, the law's price for grinding, and every farmer in the valley will tell you every miller's scoop runs deep, and every miller will tell you every farmer's bushel runs short. And this argument is 2,000 years old, and both sides are slightly right. And while the stones eat your corn, Eliakim leans close to your ear and shouts the news of the lower valley. Ice on the harbour at Boston still, hay running short everywhere, men already feeding their cattle on browse, on chopped birch tops, and God help the man whose barn runs empty in February. And a family up at the new township on the West Bank burned out of their house a week since, chimney fire, up in the night, all of them out alive in their shirts in the snow, alive because the snow was there to run into and the neighbours were there to run to. Chimney fire. The other side of the bargain. The fire that keeps you is the fire that hunts you. All winter, every winter. The chimneys flew cakes with soot and pitch, and some bitter night. Drawing hard, it lights, and then the heart of the house is a roaring column of flame, and every man in earshot is on your roof in the dark with snow and wet blankets. That is why the town has a chimney viewer, an actual town office, sworn men who inspect flues, and why Goodwife Strong burns her chimney clean on purpose on wet mornings, controlled, watched, muttering, and why the word fire shouted in a night street in this century empties every bed in 100 yards. There are only two mortal enemies in this white world, and they are the cold and the fire, and you live your whole life exactly between them, feeding one to hold off the other, closer to both than anyone in a heated century will ever stand to anything. Your meal comes off the stones warm. Did you know that? Ground corn comes out warm, heated by the very stones, and you load the sacks like 8 fat sleeping children and settle them under the lashing. And the warmth of them comes up through the sled boards, faintly for the first mile home. The first mile is fine. The second mile is fine. In the third mile the light goes strange. You notice it first as a kind of dimming without a cloud. The sun's still there, but suddenly wrong, pale, ringed. And then you see the ring plainly, a great white halo clean around the sun, and you know what it means, because every child in this valley knows what it means. It is the oldest forecast there is. A ring around the sun, and the snow comes. The wind, which all day has been a small cold trickle out of the north, swings. You feel it swing, feel it cross your face and come again from the northeast. And the northeast is the bad quarter, the storm quarter, the one the old men watch. And far down the valley behind you, above the hills, the sky is turning the colour of a bruise. The horse feels it before you finish feeling it. His ears go back toward the weather, and his jog quickens on his own, and you let him, and you do the arithmetic that is suddenly the only arithmetic in the world. 1.5 miles of river, then the landing path, then 1 mile of road. An hour at this pace, maybe less. The first flakes arrive small and dry and fast, hissing on the ice, running along it in white ropes. Within 10 minutes you cannot see the west bank. Within 20 you cannot see either bank, and the world has gone to a white roar, and you, 16 years old, alone on a frozen river with another man's horse, are inside the thing that every fireside story in this valley circles back to sooner or later. The thing that fills a corner of every burying ground. The thing the old people call by its plain name, which is worse than any fancy one. Lost in the snow. Here is what a whiteout takes from you, in order. First it takes distance. The banks go, the bends go, the world shrinks to a moving room of white maybe 40 feet across, with you in the middle of it, always in the middle of it, the room travelling with you so that you can never reach its walls. Then it takes direction. On a road you would have fences, trees, the feel of the track under the runners. On the river you have a flat white floor and a white ceiling and white walls. And the wind is the only landmark left, and you cling to it. It was northeast. It should be on your right cheek going upriver. Keep it on the right cheek. But the wind in a storm on a river between hills does not blow from one place. It pours down the side ravines. It curls back off the banks you cannot see. It strikes your right cheek, then your face, then your right cheek again, and each time it shifts, a small voice you're trying not to hear asks whether it was the wind that turned or you. Then it takes sound. You would not think snow could roar. It roars. A soft roar, a white noise in the oldest sense. Wind and snow hissing on snow, and inside it you can hear nothing beyond your own moving room. Not the falls behind you, not a dog, not a voice, nothing that could tell you where the world is. And then, if it goes on long enough, it starts to take the last thing. It starts on your judgment. The cold is no longer outside you. It has found the wet at your neck where snow drove into the muffler and melted. It has found your thighs, which have gone from burning to wooden. Your eyelashes are freezing together at the outer corners, little tugging seams of ice, and you keep breaking them apart with a mittened knuckle, and your hands have passed through pain into a distant, clumsy dumbness that frightens you more than pain would. Because you know the order of things. Everyone knows the order. Pain, then numbness. Then the numbness stops mattering to you. And that is the door you must not go through, the famous last door, where freezing men grow calm and warm and sit down for just a minute in the soft snow. Just a minute. And the ones who are found in the spring are so often found like that, seated, peaceful, 1/2 mile from a door. The horse stops. He stops dead, planted, head low, and you speak to him and slap the reins on his rump, and your voice comes out thin and strange in the roar. And he takes one step and stops again, trembling now, and something in his refusal reaches through your own fogged head. Some older animal wisdom crossing from his blood into yours, and you get down. Your knees nearly buckle when your feet hit the ice. That's how far gone your legs are. You note it from a distance like news about someone else. and you go up along his shoulder, hand on him the whole way, because in this whiteness 3 feet of separation could be forever, and you look past his nose, and in the white, right there, right at his feet where you would have driven in another minute, the white floor changes. A darker patch, grey-green, sheened, smoking faintly, snow lying wet at its edges instead of dry. The mouth of the brook, where the current comes in, where the ice is false. Mind the mouth of the brook. You stand there with your hand on the horse's shoulder, and the sight goes through you, like cold water down the spine, an inner falling, because the arithmetic is very short and you do it in one breath. Another minute of walking blind, the horse's weight, the sled's weight, dark water under thin grey ice, the current beneath running strong toward the falls, and nobody knows where you are. Nobody would even begin to know until dark, and the river keeps what it takes until spring. That sentence is not yours. It belongs to the whole valley. It is said in kitchens with lowered voices, and now you know exactly what it weighs. But, and this is the thing to hold on to, this is the turn, the brook's mouth is not only a danger, it is a landmark. It is the first fixed thing the storm has shown you in half an hour, and you know it. You know this brook. You have watered animals at this brook, and if this is the brook's mouth, then the landing path is 400 yards on, along the east bank, and the east bank is there to your right, close. It must be close. The brook comes out of it. You turn the horse, wide, careful, your hands doing the work while feeling almost nothing, and you lead him now instead of driving. Your hand at his cheek, your shoulder at his shoulder, 2 animals sharing one nerve, and you angle right, away from the false ice, until a greyness hardens in the white ahead and become a wall of snow-hung alders, the bank, the blessed bank, and you nearly laugh. A cracked little sound the wind takes instantly, and then you do the thing that the old men would nod at, the thing that saves you. You keep contact. You follow the bank the way a blind man follows a rail, never letting the alders out of arm's reach, wading the drifted edge snow, hauling the horse through it, 400 yards of it chest-heaving, endless, counting your steps to keep your mind on a leash. And the counting matters. The counting is a handhold, 100, 200, don't sit down, don't rest. Wet man freezes, moving man doesn't. 300, and the bank opens, a notch, packed snow underfoot instead of drift. The landing path. The road home from the landing is a fight, but it is a fight with walls. Stone fences run along it under the snow, and trees stand over it, and though you cannot see 30 feet, you can always see the next tree, the next fence line, and that is enough. That is how this country is actually crossed in a storm, not by heroism, by handholds, fence to tree to fence, each one a rung. You pass the Hoyt's place and see nothing of the house itself, but a smell reaches you through the snow. Wood smoke, flattened down onto the road by the wind, and that smell nearly undoes you. It is so exactly the smell of being alive. And then a sound does reach you, small and mad as wonderful, and it takes a moment to believe it. A bell. A cow bell, rung by hand, clang and stop, steady as a pulse, upwind. Goodwife Strong is standing in the door of the keeping room ringing the barn cow's bell into the storm, and has been, you will learn, for the better part of an hour. Because ringing a bell for the lost is a thing people in this world simply do, an old custom for exactly this. The poor man's lighthouse, and you steer by it, clang and stop, until the shape of the great chimney gathers itself out of the white, smoke torn sideways off its top, and the yard fence finds your hand, and the actual door, opens before you can reach it. What happens next happens fast and without ceremony, because this household does not do ceremony, it does competence. Amos is sent through the connecting shed to the barn with the horse. The shed, that humble genius of New England building, house to barn under cover, invented by winters exactly like this one. You are pulled inside. The bar drops. Your frozen mittens are worked off your hands like bark off a stick. Your greatcoat stands up by itself against the settle, cased in ice, and clatters. And then Goodwife Strong takes both your hands in both of hers, turns them white side up, and looks at your fingertips one by one in the firelight, hard, like a woman reading, and what she is reading for is the waxy dead white of true frostbite, and she doesn't find it, cold burned, blistered along 2 knuckles, but not dead. And only then does she let out her breath, and what she says, all she says is, "The meal's not wet, I hope. The meal is not wet." You croak it. The meal is not wet, the horse is sound, the sled is at the barn. And Josiah, who has been standing this whole time by the fire saying nothing, looking at you the way he looks at weather, says his 6 words. You will keep these 6 longer than the others. Minded the brook mouth, did you? It is not a question. You nod anyway. He nods back once, and turns to hang the lantern, and that is the whole medal ceremony, and it is enough. It is more than enough. It is everything, and if your eyes sting standing there, well, they have been in the wind, anyone's would. They put you on the settle with your feet in a tub of water that feels scalding and is barely warm. Never hot water on frozen limbs, everyone knows. Warmth must come back slow or it kills what it saves. And the thaw is a punishment all its own. Your feet and hands filling up with a deep itching burn as the blood argues its way back into them, and you sit there shaking and are fed, hot cider with milk and cider warmed with a hot poker, thrust hissing into the mug, and the storm leans on the house all night, and the house, built by men who knew exactly what would lean on it, leans back, and late, in the loft, under the blanket, with Amos asleep and the gale singing one long note in the chimney, your body finally lets you hear what it has been saying all evening under the burn and the ache, and what it is saying is simple, and you fall asleep in the middle of the sentence. Alive. 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 The storm blows for 2 days and leaves the world remade, fences gone under, the road a rumour, men on snowshoes moving between the houses like herons, high-stepping, checking on each other, because that is the first thing done after every great storm, always, house by house down the street, smoke from the chimney, path broken to the barn, all well within. It is not organised by anyone. It organises itself. It is older than the town. And this time, at the 3rd house from the north end, the answer is not all well. Old Marks, that is all anyone calls him, an old man who came up the valley years ago and hired out by the season and lived alone in a 1-room house at the edge of the town's land, no wife, no children here, his relations somewhere down in Connecticut or nowhere. Old Marks's chimney is not smoking, and when Deacon Field and 2 others break through the drift to his door, they find what the winter has been promising somebody all season. The fire out, days out, the ashes cold as the hearthstones, and the old man in his bed, under every piece of cloth he owned, gone. Not violently. The cold does not do violence at the end. It does subtraction. He had been ailing. The storm shut him in. The woodpile by his door, they note. Everyone will note it, quietly, for weeks. was down to bark and chips. His fire went out, and he could not raise it or reach help, and he lay down, and the house came down to the temperature of the world, and he went with it. You hear all this at second hand, and it lands in you strangely deep, and you spend a day understanding why, and then you do understand. It is the woodpile, down to bark and chips. You have spent this whole winter learning that the woodpile is the truth of a household. You can read any family's January from their dooryard, and all season it comes to you now. The whole town had been reading old Marx's dooryard, and the town's system, that great net of watchfulness, had a hole in it exactly the shape of a solitary old man too proud to be a town charge, and the storm found the hole. The Selectman had spoken of him at the last meeting. Wood had been voted for the poor. His name had been on a list. The snow did not wait for the list. The funeral is 3 days after, when the road is broken out, and it teaches you how this world buries in winter, which is with difficulty, and without softness, and with everyone present. The ground in the burying yard is frozen 4 feet down, iron all the way, and the grave is not dug so much as fought. Young men in relays with iron bars and axes, actual axes, chopping earth as if it were oak. A fire kept burning on the spot overnight to loosen the next foot. 2 days for one grave. And some towns this deep in this winter will give up the fight entirely and lay their dead in the tomb house or the snow itself, coffined, decently covered, to wait for the ground to open in April, and everyone finds this terrible, and no one finds it shocking, and there it is again, the whole winter in one sentence, terrible and not shocking. The bearers carry the coffin down the street on a sled. The town walks behind all of it, 400 people for a man who ate alone, because whatever the net failed to do for him living, it will not fail him now. A burial in this town belongs to everyone, like the meetinghouse, like the road. There is no eulogy. That is not the custom here, not yet. But at the grave old Mr. Doolittle prays long into the ringing cold, breath streaming off him, and he does not say that old Marx is in a better place. What he says, in the old grim tender way of this country's religion, is that the cold comes for every fire in its season, and that no man knows his hour, and that the living had best look to their own hearths and to each other's. And 400 people standing in snow to their knees hear each other's, and take the point, and you can feel the point being taken, all around you, like a tightening, and it tightens into action. Because in this town everything eventually becomes a vote or a chore. Within the week the selectmen have gone door to door through the North End. Wood moves, you help move it. Josiah sends the team and you and Amos with 2 cords for the widow Janes. Unasked, unpaid, and when she tries to speak of payment, Josiah looks at the sky and says, "It looks like more snow," which it does not. And you stack the wood by her door in a fortress, and her thanks follow you down the road like something warm thrown over your shoulders. You are 16, and you have now carried wood to a widow, because a man died of an empty woodpile, and something in you has quietly reorganized itself around the fact. You came to this town a charity of arithmetic yourself, a boy subtracted from a family that could not carry him. You know what the net is for from underneath. Keep your fire, keep your neighbours. The rules are shorter than the sermons. They hold better too. After that, deep February, and deep February is when the hard winter shows you its real face, which is not the storm's face. Storms are events. They arrive, they perform, they end. Deep winter is not an event. It is a condition. A great flat unmoving weight of cold, week upon week, and what it grinds is not the body first, but the household, the stores, the margins. The cellar is the calendar now. You go down into it every few days, down under the keeping room, into the dark that smells of earth and apples and brine, frost furring the stones by the hatch, and the family's whole year is down there in barrels and bins, visibly shrinking. The salt pork barrel. You can hear the difference when you knock it. The apples, soft-spotted now, sorted weekly. The failing ones eaten first. Always eat your losses first. The whole valley's housekeeping in 4 words. Turnips, cabbages buried in sand, dried beans, the corn overhead in the garret drying on the cob. It is all still enough, Josiah's providence saw to that. But enough has a slope to it now, an angle you can feel, and Goodwife Strong's cooking begins to perform the quiet fractions that every housewife in the province is performing this month. A little more meal in the pudding, a little less pork in the beans, the molasses thread grown thinner, and no one says anything, because saying something is not how this family does anything. The animals feel it harder. Hay is the fear now, all up and down the valley. The barns were filled in September for a normal winter, and this winter has already eaten a normal winter and asked for another. And by late February, Josiah is up in the mow measuring what remains with his eye, jaw working, and then you're sent into the swamp lot with the axe to fell birch and let the cattle at the tops browse famine food, and the cows strip the twigs with sideways hauls of their heads, and their hip bones are rising under their hides like tent poles, and every farmer at the nooning on Sabbath is having the same conversation in the same low voice. Hay, left, hay, left, hay, left. Some men are already driving cattle down the valley to sell for whatever the lower towns will give, better a poor price than a dead cow, and some men will lose the gamble the other way, and in April the price of everything will remember this February for 2 years. Even the wildlife is spending its last coin. The deer, starving, yard up in the cedar swamps, trampling small prisons of packed snow, eating the browse down to nothing, and the crust. There is a crust now, thaw glazed and refrozen, that will almost carry a boy. The crust carries the wolves, and does not carry the deer. And what happens out there in the swamps in the white distance is what the wolves' voices have been promising all winter. And one still morning you and Amos on snowshoes find a yard broken open, and read the whole story in red and trampled snow, and Amos, 14, says nothing the whole way home, which for Amos is a first. And through all of it, the work does not pause, because the work is not able to pause. Water, wood, fodder, fire, fire, fodder, wood, water. Your hands by now are a record anyone could read. Cracked at every knuckle, tallow-shined, wood-splintered, rope-calloused, one thumbnail black from the sled stake and growing out in a slow, dark moon. You have stopped being tired the way you used to be tired. The tiredness has moved in permanently and become a kind of floor you stand on. You fall asleep now in the middle of your own thoughts, mid-sentence, the way a candle is snuffed. But something else has happened too, so gradually you almost missed it. You have stopped being afraid of the winter. Respect, more than ever. You flinch at a northeast wind now the way a burned child flinches at a kettle, and you will for the rest of your life. But the fear that sat on your chest in December, the sense of the cold as a thing that was hunting you personally, that has changed into something workmanlike. You know the winter now. You know its habits, its tells, its bad quarters, and its false ice. You've been inside its worst hour and walked out the far side holding a horse's cheek-piece. The winter is not your friend and never will be, but it has become your trade, the way the river is the fisherman's trade, dangerous, studied, daily, and there is a specific quiet in the middle of your chest, brand new this year, that comes from exactly that. The old people have a word for what you are getting. They call it being seasoned, wood seasons. So do people. Both of them by standing out in the weather until the green is dried out of them, until they hold an edge and take a load and stop warping. You are 16 years old, cracked knuckles, black thumbnail, 3 pounds a year, and you are seasoning. You can feel it happening. It feels like the ache in your shoulders. It feels like the 6 words. It feels almost, on the good days, like becoming someone. There is one more enemy this winter carries, and it does not come on the wind. It comes in the throat. It starts on a Tuesday, and it starts small, the way the bad things always start small. Amos, at supper, not eating. Amos, who eats the way fire eats. He pushes the samp around the trencher and says he isn't hungry, and Goodwife Strong's head comes up like a doze at a snapped twig, and she is across the room with the back of her hand against his forehead before he can duck, and her face does a thing you've never seen it do, which is nothing, perfectly nothing, a held stillness, and that stillness frightens you worse than any expression could, because you know by now how to read this woman, and stillness is what she does over the deep water. By morning Amos is burning. By the second night his throat has gone raw, and his voice has gone strange, thick, and he lies in the bed you share. You've been moved to a pallet by the chimney, and nobody explains why, and you don't ask, because you know why. And the why is a word that this valley says the way it says wolf, low, not wanting to call it closer. The throat distemper. You should know what those words mean in this world, because they are not a sore throat. 5 years ago, 6, a sickness came down through New Hampshire and into these river towns like a slow fire through dry grass, and it took children, almost only children. It closed their throats, a grey skin growing inside, the doctor's letter said, choking them in their beds over days while their mothers watched. And it went through households like a scythe. 3 children from one hearth, 5 from another, whole families of small stones going up in the burying yards in a single season, carved with lambs, carved with hours, age 6 years, age 4 years, age 9 months. There are towns north of here that lost 1/3 of everyone under 10. 1/3. The old people put it beside the old wars when they count the griefs of this valley, and some of them put it above. It has never fully left. It smoulders. Every winter, somewhere in the province, it flares in a town or two, and every winter every mother in New England watches every fevered throat with her heart in her teeth. And that is the stillness in Goodwife Strong's face. She's looking down her own boy's throat by candlelight with a spoon handle, twice a day, morning and evening, looking for the grey skin. There is no doctor in Northfield. There is a doctor down the valley, half a day's ride, and he would come, and he would bleed the boy and blister him and prescribe what the books prescribe. And the honest truth, which even some of the doctors half know, is that none of it turns the thing once it truly takes hold. So what stands between Amos and the dark is what has always stood there. His mother, the neighbours, and the kitchen's own medicine. And you spend that week learning the kitchen's medicine with your own hands, because everyone serves in a sick house. That is the law under the law. You keep the fire higher than thrift would ever allow, because warmth is physic, and no one counts wood against a sick child. You haul and heat water, gallons of it for the steaming, a tent of blankets over the boy's head, a basin under it breathing vinegar and herbs, hyssop, sage, whatever the garret bundles hold. You run through the dark to the fields for a lump of loaf sugar, and to the widow Jane's because she keeps bees and honey is wanted, and the doors open at your knock at any hour instantly, faces already asking, because the town knows by the second day, the town always knows, and the town moves the way it moved after the storm. Mercy Field's mother sits up 2 nights so Goodwife Strong can sleep. The deacon's family takes the Strongs milking. The minister comes and prays at the bedside long and drinks a mug of cider after with his hands shaking slightly from more than cold, because Mr. Doolittle buried the last epidemic's children himself, all of them, one funeral at a time, and a man does not set that down again lightly. And you, at night, on your pallet by the chimney, you listen. That becomes your unspoken office, the hired boy's watch. You sleep in the keeping room now to keep the fire, and the fire is half your reason. The other half is the sound from the chamber overhead. Amos's breathing dragging in and out through his ruined throat, and you lie there in the dark, cataloguing it against itself, hour by hour, rougher, easier, faster, and you discover a thing about yourself that surprises you, which is that somewhere in these 2 years, without your permission, this boy who steals blankets and licks latches and cannot pass a woodpile without knocking something off it has become not your brother. But not your brother. The word for what he is doesn't exist, or it does, and you're lying next to its chimney. On the 5th night the fever breaks. It breaks the way weather breaks, in the small hours with a great sweat. The bedding soaked through, and the boy suddenly, deeply, differently asleep, real sleep, slack, quiet, his breath running smooth. And Goodwife Strong comes down the stairs at dawn with a candle in her hand and 20 years off her face and says, "To the room, to the fire, to God, to you," in a voice you have never heard her use. "He'll do." And then she sits down, just sits, at the table in the grey light, this woman you've never once seen sit while there was light in the sky, and puts her hands flat on the boards and looks at them. You put the kettle on without being told. It is the only sentence you can think of in any language you own. Amos is a week more in bed and 2 weeks a shadow, cross and weak and demanding, and it is the most cheerful ill-temper ever endured in that house. His complaints are received like psalms. The spoon and candle inspections continue morning and evening, until even Goodwife Strong's vigilance stands down. It was a fever with an ulcerated throat, the Valley's ordinary winter wolf, and not the other thing, not the grey skin, or it was a light brush of the other thing turned aside. No one will ever know, and no one needs to. In this world you do not always get to learn what almost happened. You only get to keep what didn't. But the week leaves its mark on you, the way the storm did, and the mark is this. You had thought, after the river, that you understood what the winter could take. You had been thinking of it as a thing that happens outdoors. Now you know better. The cold kills at the door, and the fire kills at the hearth, and the third enemy walks straight in past both of them and sits down on the edge of a child's bed, and against that one there is no bar to drop, no bank of coals, no fence line to follow. There is only the watching and the neighbours and the terrible patient courage of women, which this valley runs on the way it runs on corn, and which is written down almost nowhere, and which you have now seen at a distance of 10 feet for 5 nights, and will not forget. When Amos is well enough to be insufferable again, and demands to hear for the 4th time the story of you and the horse and the brook mouth, you tell it to him for the 4th time, and you add nothing to it, and he adds enough for both of you. The house settles back into its winter, but you notice that for a good while afterward, when Goodwife Strong passes the boy's bed of an evening, her hand finds the top of Amos's head, briefly in passing, like a woman touching wood. The middle of winter also has its Mondays, and you should live through one because the histories never do. Washing day in January. Think it through. Every step, because every step is a woman's arms. The linen of 8 people, shifts and shirts and clouts and sheets, and every drop of water for it drawn from the well by the bucket, hauled, heated over the fire in the great kettles, the pounding and wringing in steam and lye soap that eats the cracks in your knuckles like something alive. The keeping room turned all day into a fog of steam and ash smell, and then the drying. And here is the detail to keep. The washers hung out, in the yard, in air 20 degrees below freezing, and it does dry. The cold air is desert dry, and the ice itself breathes away. A slow magic nobody has a name for yet. But first, every shirt and sheet freezes board stiff on the line within minutes, and you're sent out to bring in the finished pieces and come back through the door, carrying frozen shirts flat across your arms like planks, like the ghosts of the family standing at attention, and you stack the family against the settle to finish limbering in the fire's heat, and Amos, recovering, salutes them. Candlelight has its own chore behind it too, and you serve that one as well. The candles were dipped in the fall, days of it, tallow rendered from the November slaughter, the kitchen thick with the heavy smell of hot fat, rods of wicks dipped and cooled and dipped and cooled, 40, 60 times each, growing slow as icicles grow, until the family's whole winter of light hung in rows in the cellarway. And now that light is spent the way everything here is spent, watched. 1 candle burning in a room is economy, 2 is company. The Bible verse read aloud at night is read close to the flame. And when tallow runs low toward spring, you all live more by firelight, which is free, and go to bed with the dark, which is also free. Light, warmth, sweetness, salt, everything that makes the dark half of the year bearable is a stored thing, a counted thing, a thing someone's hands made in the bright half. You knew that in the fall the way you know a catechism answer. You know it now the way you know the weight of a full bucket, and once, in the dead of that January, you see the other kind of light, the kind nobody made. It is Amos who wakes you, recovered enough by then to be prowling to the window at night, hissing your name from the loft ladder, and you come up cold and cross and then not cross at all, because through the little gable window the northern sky is on fire. Not fire's colour, stranger. Great slow curtains of red and green standing up from the hills, folding, unfolding, climbing halfway to the top of the sky, with rays that spoke outward and dissolve and are replaced. All of it in total silence, the whole north end of the world alight and moving like a slow flag. The northern lights, and this winter, the winter of the hard cold, is also a winter of great auroras, and all over New England people are standing at their windows exactly as you are, and not all of them are calm about it. In the towns some run into the streets, some fall to praying. There is talk for weeks after in the nooning and the tavern of what it portends. War, they mostly guess. Blood in the sky meaning blood on the frontier, and in a few years, when the next war does come down that same northern road, plenty will remember and say they had been shown. You stand at the little window with Amos, the two of you wrapped in the one blanket, breath icing the glass, and you don't know what it means. and neither does anyone in the province, and neither, for once, do the wisest heads in Boston, and there is something in that. The whole learned world standing at its windows as ignorant as a hired boy, that you find strangely companionable. The sky performs for an hour and takes nothing and asks nothing, and you go back down to your pallet with your head full of green fire, and in the morning the woodpile is still the woodpile, and you carry it anyway, and it feels different all day, and you couldn't say how. And because this is a true account of a season and not a sermon, you should know that the hard winter was not only hardness. Winter in this world has a second face, and it would be a lie to leave it out. Winter is also the season of company. Think about it from inside the year. Spring is ploughing and lambing and mud. Summer is haying, which is war. Autumn is harvest, which is war with a deadline. From April to November, daylight is money, and everyone is spending every minute of it. And neighbours wave to each other across their labour like ships passing. But now the ground is locked. The day is short. The heavy hauling is done or waiting. And for the one time in the whole turning year, this world has evenings, and the evenings gather. That is the word for it, the word they use. People gather. To the kitchen, the one warm room, after supper, after chores, the Hoyts through the snow with a lantern, or you and Amos to the Hoyts, or half the young people of the North End to a husking floor or a kitchen big enough. And what happens then is everything that this world has instead of everything you have. The women bring their spinning and their knitting, because hands here are never idle, even at rest. The wheels whirring low under the talk. The men mend harness and shave axe handles by the fire, shavings curling down sweet-smelling between their feet. There are apples roasting on strings before the flames, spinning slowly, hissing, filling the room with a smell you would recognize across 3 centuries. There is cider, always cider, the whole valley's daily drink, and on a great night flip. Hot flip, cider and rum and sugar beaten and then plunged with the red-hot poker till it roars and froths and tastes of burnt heaven, and you are allowed 1 mug of it, being 16 and having minded the brook mouth, and it goes down like a lit fuse and makes the whole room lean closer to itself. And then the stories, because this is what a fireside is for. In a world with no other screens, it is where the town keeps its memory, and winter is when the memory is played. The old men tell the great snows before this one. Ensign Wright, who is past 70, holds the room with the winter of the 10 storms he knew as a boy, houses buried whole, tunnels dug from door to door, and each great snow in the telling is measured against this one, and this one, the old men admit, and they're admitting as a kind of dark civic pride passing around the room like the flip. This one is the master of them all. And then, always, late, when the fire is down to a deep orange and the youngest children are asleep in laps, come the other stories, the ones this town keeps low in its chest, the burnings, the old wars, the captives marched north on the river ice in winters just like this one. Because that happened. It happened to people whose grandchildren are sitting in this room, neighbours taken from towns a day's walk south and made to walk to Canada through the snow. And some came back years later speaking French, and some came back not wanting to come back, and some never. And when those stories are told, the room goes very still, and the fire ticks, and outside the wind moves along the eaves like something checking the latches, and then someone's mother says that's enough of that now, and someone starts a psalm or a foolish song, and the room rights itself like a sled coming off a tilt. And there is a girl. Of course there is a girl, you are 16. Her name is Mercy Field, the deacon's second daughter, and she is 15 and has a way of looking sideways when she's about to say something quick, and she says quick things, quiet, at the edge of the room, that take a second to go off, like sparks in tinder. You have handed her down from a sleigh twice, 10 fingers worth of contact through 2 mittens, and you have unaccountably memorized both occasions. On the great moonlit nights, the young people of the town go sledding on the meetinghouse hill and skating on the river's flooded meadow ice, with bonfires built on the shore. Whole constellations of towns doing the same thing up and down every frozen valley in New England, sleds hissing down under a moon so bright on so much snow that the night is silver blue, and you can read faces at 50 yards. And on one of those nights Mercy Field rides down the long track on the sled you steer. Her mittens gripped in the shoulders of your father's coat, both of you shouting, the cold tearing tears out of your eyes, and at the bottom she says sideways quick that you steer better than you talk, and walks off up the hill, and you stand there in the blue night grinning like the town fool, being exactly, perfectly 16. The winter that kills is the same winter that gives you this. You're learning to hold both. The way you learn to hold the axe, one hand high, one hand low, both hands. That's the third rule, maybe. Both hands, all season. And then one afternoon at the very end of February, in a day of no particular promise, hauling the last sled of the swamp birch, you and the team come up over the shoulder of Strong's Hill, the high pasture, the highest cleared land the farm has, and you stop the oxen to breathe them, and you turn around, and the valley does the thing that valleys sometimes do, which is take off its workaday face and show you what it actually is. The sun is an hour from setting, low out of a clean gold sky, and the light is coming down the valley the long way, sideways, the way late light does, and every tree of the miles of forest on the eastern hills is picked out separately, each one carrying its line of snow like a lit thread, and the river runs through the middle of the world below you. A broad white road glowing faintly rose, and along it the town. One street, the houses strung on it like beads on a string, and from every house a chimney, and from every chimney smoke, rising now straight and unhurried into the gold, 18, 20, 24 soft columns, and you stand there by the steaming oxen with your hands going numb, and you count them. You actually count them, chimney by chimney. 'Cause you know now, this is what the winter has done to your eyes. You know what each of those columns is. Each one is a fire that has been kept alive, hand to hand, hour by hour since October. Each one has a woman reading its coals and a man measuring its woodpile and children asleep in its heat, and each one is exactly as mortal as old Marx's was, and every single one of them is still burning. The whole town, visible at one glance, saying the only thing a town in this world ever needs to say, saying it upward in smoke against 400 miles of frozen forest, still here, still here, still here. And beyond the town, north, up the white road of the river, the forest goes on and on into the blue distance and the coming dark. No smoke, no clearing, nothing English. The whole silent weight of the continent, and the town stands against it with its 24 threads of smoke, and it should look pitiful, and it does not. It looks like the bravest thing you've ever seen. You're a hired boy on a hill with an axe and someone else's oxen. You own the coat on your back and £3 a year and a black thumbnail. And standing there in the gold light above the smoking town, you would not at this moment trade places with the king. The oxen shift. The cold finds your collar. The light starts to go. You turn the team down the hill toward one particular column of smoke, the one you could find blind in a storm by a cowbell. Home before dark. You mind what you're told mostly now, and before the winter lets go, it owes you one more day, and it pays in full, because late in that February the town finally goes after the wolves. It has been coming all season. The bounty stands in the town book. The field's sheep is a story every hearth has heard. The crust is hard now, hard enough to carry men on snowshoes clean over the buried fences, and the moon is coming full. And at the tavern after training day the talk finally tips over from talk into a plan, the way it always does in this town, with a list of names and a set hour. A circular hunt. The old kind. The kind their grandfathers made. The men and grown boys of Northfield and the near farms, 30, 40 of them, strung out at dawn in a great loose ring around the cedar swamp north of the townlands, closing inward together, driving whatever winter has been keeping there toward the middle and the guns. And you are on the list. Josiah put your name in with his own, which is a sentence in itself. That morning is the coldest kind of clear, the snow squeaking, the sun coming up small and hard, and the muster at the Northfield is like nothing you have seen. Men in bearskin and blanket coats, muskets and fowling pieces slung, powder horns knocking, dogs beside themselves on their ropes, breath rising off the whole company as off a boiling kettle, and old Ensign Wright, past 70, on his snowshoes at the front because there was never any question, giving the order of the drive in a voice that has given it for 50 years. Keep your interval, keep your line. No man fires into the ring. Drive with noise until the closing, and God keep you all in your places. Then the long morning, the ring closing through the swamp, tree by tree, drift by drift, every man shouting, beating trunks with axe poles, the dogs giving tongue somewhere out of sight, the cedar thickets shaking down their loads of snow on your neck, your snowshoes catching and your thighs burning, and always to your left and right, glimpse through the trees, the next men in the line keeping their interval, keeping the net, because that is what you are. You understand it somewhere in the second hour. You're the net again, the same net as always, the town closing its hand. What the hand closes on in the end is 2 wolves. A big dog wolf that tries the line to the west and is turned by the dogs and shot in the open going away, rolled over twice in the snow by the ball, dead before the men reach him, and a second, younger, that breaks the ring entirely, goes through a gap between 2 winded farmers like grey smoke through a fence, gone north, and good luck to it, the men say, half meaning it. And a bobcat nobody expected, treed and shrieking and left to its tree by common consent, and a great number of hares, and one deeply embarrassed stray hog that has been living wild in the swamp since October, and is hauled home in triumph by its owner to the loudest laughter of the day. The dead wolf is brought out on a pole, and at the tavern that evening the whole hunt is fought again twice over flip, and the head will go to the selectman for the bounty, and the bounty money, it is voted with great solemnity by everyone not paying it, should rightly buy a drink for every man on the drive. And you stand in the pressed warm reek of that tavern room, wet wool, rum, pipe smoke, 40 thawing men, with your ears still ringing from the shot, holding your small beer, 16 years old and included, and you look at the wolf's head on the bench by the door, the eyes gone dull, the great cold country coat, the teeth, and you feel the 2 feelings at once, and by now you know to let yourself feel both. Relief, plain and warm as the room, that is the thing that has been walking the crust around the sheep pen since December, and it will not walk again. and under the relief, quieter, a thing you will not say aloud in this company, that it was hungry, that is all it ever was. It was hungry in a winter that starved the deer and split the trees, the same winter that nearly took you at a brook mouth, and it came down out of the hills toward the smell of the fires, the same way you steered toward a cowbell, and the town closed its hand, because the town must, because the sheep are the stockings and the blanket, because that is the whole hard arithmetic of the edge of the world. Both hands, all season. You're getting the knack of it. The tavern, since you're finally standing in it, deserves a minute of its own, because the histories give the meeting house all the ink, and the tavern kept just as many people alive. It is the town's other warm room, licensed by the court, watched by the tithingman, and indispensable anyway, it's the place where the road arrives. Travellers put up here, drovers and post-riders and the peddler with his ballads. The news comes here first and gets argued here longest. Town meeting adjourns to here in all but name. Bargains are struck by the fire and sealed in cider, sleds and oxen swapped, a hired boys next season spoken for. The law of the province frowns on tippling, and the same law requires every town to keep a house of entertainment, and no one in the room finds the contradiction worth a wrinkle, because everyone in the room has come in off that road in that cold, and knows exactly which sermon a half-frozen man needs first. And it is at the tavern fire, late in the wolf hunt evening, that you get your last teacher of the winter, because Ensign Wright ends up on the settle next to you with his pipe, 70-some years of this valley folded up in a bearskin coat, and he looks you over sideways. Everyone in this town looks sideways, you've decided. It is the local angle of truth, and says he hears you are the boy who walked the river home through the great storm. You say you mostly walk the bank, sir. And the old man laughs, one dry bark, and points at you with the pipe stem, and says that that is the correct answer, and that he will tell you the whole of winter in this country, since you are young enough to still need telling. And he does, and it is short, the way the true things are. He says, the ones the winter takes, it mostly takes for one of three prides. The pride of hurry, men who wouldn't wait out a sky. The pride of strength, men who reckon their bodies would beat the arithmetic. And the pride of aloneness. And here he is quiet a moment, and the fire ticks, and you both, without saying so, are down at the north end of town at a cold hearth. The pride of aloneness, men who would not be beholden. He says the country is not cruel, no more than the river is wet. It is only exact. It will carry any weight you put on it, on two conditions, that you know the weight and that you know the ice. And then he stands up, all his joints reporting like the house frame at midnight, and gathers his coat and delivers free of charge the sentence you will still be repeating to your own grandchildren beside another fire in another century of the world. Be beholden, boy. It's the only rope across. Then he goes home across the moonlit snow, an old man on wide shoes over deep drifts, entirely unafraid, in the 20th or 40th hard winter of his life, and you watch him from the tavern door until the blue dark takes him, and you have just enough sense, at 16, to know you have been handed something, and to carry it carefully. And since the winter is nearly told, take one more ordinary evening before the thaw, a nothing evening, because the nothing evenings were most of it, and they deserve their minute too. It is a Thursday at the end of February, windless, iron cold, the moon not yet up. Chores are done, the barn is barred, supper was bean porridge, third day of the same pot, and the third day is the best day. The whole valley agrees. Bean porridge in the pot 9 days old. The rhyme is older than the town. Now the keeping room settles into its night shape, and every person in it is working, because a fireside here is never only rest. Josiah has the broken hame strap across his knees, waxed thread hissing through the leather, all pull, all pull. Goodwife Strong's wheel purrs and stops, the thread running out long and thin between her fingers, 40 years of judgment in each half-inch of it. Amos is shelling the seed corn, ears across his lap, thumbing the kernels off into the basket with a sound like slow rain. And you are at the hearth end of the table with the shoe grease and the whetstone, doing the boys' offices, working tallow into 4 pairs of shoes with your thumbs and then putting an edge back on the kitchen knives. The stone going shick, 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 and the fire ticking and the frost cracking one beam and then another and nobody talking. And then Goodwife Strong, without lifting her eyes from the thread, begins the psalm. Just begins it. Low, mid-verse almost. The old way of singing, slow and bare. No instrument in 100 miles that would be allowed within a rod of a psalm anyway. And Josiah comes in under her. A tone you would never guess out of that silent man. Deep and sure. And Amos, still shelling, picks it up the way you'd pick up a bucket, unthinking. And you know the tune now. 2 winters have taught it into you, and you come in too quietly. Grease on your thumbs, and the 4 of you sing it through to the end while the work goes on in your hands, wheel and awl and corn and stone keeping their own time under the tune. It is not a performance. Nobody looks at anybody. It is more like the house breathing, and you sit inside that sound in the one warm room in a frozen valley on the edge of a frozen continent, and you understand something that you will never once in your life manage to say out loud, so you never will. You will only, ever afterward, all your days, be a man who goes still for a moment when he hears slow singing from another room. That will be the whole visible sign of it. That will be enough. The psalm ends. The wheel purrs on. 9 o'clock comes. The Bible is taken down and a chapter read by firelight. Prayers are said kneeling, the floor cold through your breeches at the knee, and then the great nightly liturgy of shutting down, which you could do blind and one day, old, will do in your sleep and wake with your hand on a latch. Candles out, pinched, never blown. A blown candle spatters the tallow, the dog to the shed, the ashes raked, the coals heaped and buried, your own hands doing it now, deep and slow and right, because you will never bank a fire shallow again as long as you live. That lesson cost too much to waste. The bar dropped in its brackets, and the last of all Josiah's own office that he has never once skipped. The walk to the window with the candle lantern for one look at the barn, one look at the sky, reading tomorrow in the stars' hardness, and then his one word to the room, which is the same word every night, which is good, and up the stairs and the house going down into the dark behind you, all like a banked fire itself, warm at the buried heart of it, safe till morning. That was the winter. Not the storm mostly that. March comes in like a rumour nobody trusts, because March in New England is a liar, and everyone knows it, and the hard winter's March lies harder than most. There is a soft day, an actual soft day, the wind out of the south, the eaves suddenly loud with dripping, the snow going grey and heavy, the whole world smelling, for the first time in 4 months, of water and earth instead of nothing, of iron, and everyone's blood rises like sap, and then the wind swings back into the north overnight and lays a foot of new snow on the valley, just to establish who is still in charge. Twice this happens. 3 times. Robin snow, the old people call a late one, and sugar snow and poor man's fertilizer. this world having pet names for the blows it expects, the way you nickname a hard master. But under the lying weather, the true things begin. The sap starts. And the sap is the first paycheck of the year, and it goes to the young and the half-grown, which is you. You and Amos out in the maple lot with auger and axe boring the trees, the bit-pulling curls of wet wood that smell faintly sweet, the first sweet smell of the year driving in the spouts of split sumac, hanging the troughs, and then day after day of the great dripping tink, 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 all through the woods, hundreds of small clocks all ticking towards spring, and the hauling of sap by shoulder yoke through snow gone rotten and treacherous, breaking through to your knee, to your hip, swearing in ways the meetinghouse will never hear about, and the long boiling 40 gallons of sap to one of syrup day and night at the kettle in the woods, feeding the fire, always, still, forever feeding the fire, but this fire makes sweetness, this fire you feed laughing, and keeping the night watch under the loud stars with the steam rolling up gold in the firelight, and Amos asleep against a log with his mouth open, and you, alone, in charge, stirring, skimming, 16, seasoned, watching winter be rendered down at last into something you can pour on a johnny cake. The ice goes out of the river in the last week of March, and it does not go quietly. It goes like an empire falling. For days beforehand the river talks louder, booms, long shearing groans, water showing black at the bank edges, and then on a warm rain night the whole 4 months of it lets go at once, and the sound wakes the town, and half the town gets up and goes down to the street to watch by lantern light, because this is theatre, the best of the year, the ice rising, breaking, the great plates of it, some of them wide as house floors, grinding downstream in the dark, rearing up against each other with shrieks and cannon cracks, stacking into jams that dam the whole river, and then blow out with a rush you feel in the road, and the water underneath, freed, loud, brown, alive, running south with the whole winter on its back. Men stand in the mud and firelight naming the years of the great freshets. Boys throw stones at the passing floes. Somewhere on the bank a dog barks himself hoarse at the river, outraged that the road he walked all winter is leaving. By morning it is gone. Open water, bank to bank, steaming in the early sun. The white highway has closed for the season. The mud season has opened. The valley's whole geometry changes back, and you stand at the landing where you once led a horse blind through a roaring whiteness, and the place where the false ice lay at the brook mouth is just water now, innocent, glittering, chuckling into the current, and you look at it for a while, and it looks back the way rivers do, admitting nothing. The cellar holds, barely, but it holds. The last weeks are turnips and saltfish and pride. And the hay holds, barely. The cows coming out to the first bare ground in April, gaunt as rails and drunk on grass, and the town has lost old Marks and 2 infants and 1 man's toes and no one else. And when the minister gives thanks in April for the town's preservation, through the late extraordinary winter, the amen has a weight to it that you can feel through the floor of the gallery, 400 people setting down a load. And one evening in that first true spring week, the peepers just started in the swamp, a sound like the night itself ringing, the door open at supper for the first time in half a year. Josiah Strong does an unheard of thing. He talks, not much. This is still Josiah. But after the meal he stays at the table instead of going to his bench and his harness mending, and he turns his cider mug a quarter turn and a quarter turn back, and he says that he has written to your mother, that he has told her the boy is well grown and handy and has a head in a storm, that when your time with him is out 2 years from now, There will be work here for wages if you want it, a man's wages, and that the North Country is opening. New townships going up the river every year, land for young men who know an axe and a yoke and can keep themselves alive in the weather. And then he looks at you, direct, which he almost never does, and says the longest sentence you will ever hear him say. Any fool can farm in June. This country's looking for the ones who can hold it in January. You held. And that is all. He takes his mug to the bench. Goodwife Strong is very busy with the kettle, her back to the room, and stays busy an unusually long time. You go out into the dooryard afterward because you need the sky. The evening is soft, actually soft. The air has texture again, smells again. Mud, smoke, the first green. The peepers ring. Down the darkening street the windows are going gold one by one. Candle and firelight. The town lighting itself for the night the way it has every night. The way it did all winter. The way it will for as long as it is a town. The woodpile beside you is down to a few courses, ragged, nearly spent, honourably spent, and past the barn on the rise the new woodpile has already begun, because it has, of course it has, that is the whole secret. Next winter's warmth starts now, the axe and the seasons chasing each other forever, and you stand between the old pile and the new one, 16 going on something else, in a dead man's coat that fits you now, and you find you're doing the thing you did on the hill, counting fires. You will do it all your life, you suspect. It is the winter's gift, or its scar, or both. They are so often both. Wherever you go from here, up whatever river, into whatever new township of stumps and hope, you will be a person who looks at a lit window and knows the whole hidden machinery behind it. The banked coals, the hauled water, the 10 tons of wood, the woman reading the oven with her arm, the man measuring the mow with his eye, the boy on the ladder in the dark. The enormous, invisible, hourly work of not going out. Keep your fire. You look at the town keeping its fires, and you turn, and you go back inside, and you bar the door. And now, let it get late. Let the story bank itself down the way you bank the coals, carefully, for the night. Because here is what happened to all of it, and you should hear this last part the way you'd hear it half asleep, because that is how it is meant to be heard. The hard winter ended. They all end. That is the one mercy built into them. The boy grew the way they do. Say he served out his time and took his wages, and went up the river with an axe and a chest of tools to one of the new townships in the raw green hills. Say a certain quick-spoken, sideways-looking girl went with him, which is the way these stories went by the hundreds, up every valley in that country. Say he built his chimney first, the way they all did, the chimney first, the house around it after, the heart before the body, and lit his own first fire in it from coals carried from a neighbour's hearth, because that too is how it was done. Fire handed along, house to house, generation to generation, an unbroken relay of embers running back down the years further than anyone could say, and say that every winter for 50 more years, on the first hard night of the season, when the frost flowered on the windows and the house began to crack its knuckles in the cold, he got up, an old man now in the black hours, without quite knowing why, and came down the stairs he knew, blind, and knelt at his own hearth, and touched the banked ashes with the back of his hand to feel the live warmth sleeping under them, still there, still here. The winters he knew would soften out of the world's memory. The stoves would come, and then the furnaces, and then the quiet magic you live inside now. Warmth arriving through walls with no one carrying it. Fire with no keeper, light with no flame. the 40 chords, the frozen ink, the bell rung into the storm, all of it would sink down out of daily life and become what it is tonight, a story told slow in the dark to help someone rest. But you know something now that you didn't know an hour ago. You know what every warm room is standing on. Centuries of kept fires, centuries of people getting up in the dark so that other people could stay asleep. The whole long relay of embers, hand to hand, house to house, winter to winter, all the way down to the warmth around you at this moment which arrived so quietly you never once had to think about it. Tonight you thought about it. That's enough. That's plenty. So let the valley go now. Let the snow smooth over the fields and the fences, over the road and the river, over the whole white length of it, soft and deep and blue in the starlight. Let the town sleep. The animals are watered. The wood is in. The doors are barred and the coals are banked. Every hearth down the long street breathing slow under its ashes, safe till morning. Let the boy sleep. Up under the roof, done with his day, done with his winter, the blanket to his chin and his cracked hands finally still. And let yourself go with him. You're warm enough. You're safe enough. You've done enough. The fire is banked. The night can lean on the house all it likes. The house was built for it, and so, it turns out, were you. Let your thoughts settle down into their ashes now, one by one, going soft and orange and dim. They'll keep till morning. Everything keeps till morning. Some things don't change. The need for warmth doesn't change. The need for rest at the end of the long haul, that doesn't change either. So take it. You've earned it, same as he did. Sleep now. Good night.